Hi and welcome to Crab Recap. Today I will tell you about a movie called The Truman Show. The movie begins with an interview for a reality TV show called Truman Show, where the actors say that everything is real, only controlled. The show's star is none other than Truman Burbank, whose life has been broadcasted 24/7 ever since he was born. However, Truman has no idea that he's living in a TV set that's disguised as an island called Sea Haven. He merrily starts his day as usual, greeting his neighbors before driving to work. There, he sneaks a phone call to a directory looking for a person named Lauren Garland who lives in Fiji, but there's no record of her. Suddenly, Truman's boss orders him to close an insurance deal on a neighboring island, which Truman reluctantly accepts in order to keep his job. So he heads to the harbor to get the ferry tickets, but when he walks down the pier, he stops as he has a phobia of the sea. This is due to the traumatic boat accident when he was a child that caused his father to drown and pass away. Truman ends up bailing on the deal and later hangs out with his best friend, Marlin. He confides with Marlin about wanting to explore the world and leaving his mundane routine, but Marlin just brushes him off. At home, he also confides with his wife, Meryl, about wanting to go to Fiji. Meryl also tries to persuade Truman to just stay at Sea Haven, obviously because he can't know about the real world, and Meryl is part of the show's cast. The next day, as he walks to his office, Truman sees a homeless man that looks like his deceased father. When Truman approaches, suddenly two random citizens drags the homeless man away into a bus that immediately drives away, while Truman tries to chase it despite the many convenient obstacles around him. He tells his mother about the encounter, but she says that he's seeing things due to his grief and that his father is definitely dead. However, Truman doesn't seem satisfied with this answer. At home, he goes to the basement to see the old pictures of him and his dad together, as well as an old red sweater. One of the audience watching Truman Show notes that it used to belong to his old crush. The show then broadcasts a flashback of Truman's college days. He was playing around with Marlin at the campus field when he saw a beautiful young woman sitting under a tree who smiled back at him. He couldn't take his eyes off her, but then Meryl intentionally fell on top of Truman to distract him. When he looked again, the woman was gone. Truman spotted the woman again at a party, and while Meryl tried to distract him once more, he saw the woman forcibly taken away by some people. Finally, he got the chance to meet her while he was studying at the library. The woman's name is Lauren Garland, and she told Truman that she's not allowed to talk to him. Truman insisted on taking her on a date, and because Lauren wanted Truman to feel some freedom, she said that the date has to happen right now. So, Truman let Lauren guide them, running away from the cameras that he was oblivious to. They arrive at the beach, but Lauren said they don't have much time. Truman went in for a kiss, which was reciprocated well by her, until she noticed a car coming their way. In a panic, Lauren told Truman that his life isn't real, and it's all just a TV show, which only confused Truman. Then, the man from the car pretended to be Lauren's father and forced her inside the car, saying that she has schizophrenia. He told Truman that they're moving to Fiji before driving away. Truman noticed that Lauren let her sweater, but it was too late. Back in the present, it's now morning again, and Truman is driving to work when the radio experiences an error. It eventually tunes into the frequency used by the crew to communicate Truman's whereabouts, which freaks him out. Before this, weird things also happened to Truman, such as a stage light falling from the sky and the rain only pouring down on him at the beach. Now somewhat paranoid, he decides to take a detour and walks around his office's surroundings. He eventually enters a building, where he spots a break room for the show's crew behind a supposed elevator. Unfortunately, he was forced out by the building's security guards. Then, Truman runs to a store where Marlin works to tell his friend about the weird things that happened to him. Truman suspects that everyone is conspiring against him, but Marlin says it's just his imagination, and instead tries to manipulate Truman to think that his life is perfect. At home, this manipulation continues from his mother and Meryl as they look through the family's photo album. Even the TV manipulates him using a specific movie. However, Truman starts to realize this, especially when he sees Meryl crossing her fingers in their wedding picture. So, the next day, Truman begins his scheme as he breaks away from his routine. He follows Meryl to the hospital she's supposed to work at, then he goes to a travel agent to book a ticket to Fiji. The agent says says that the next flight available is 3 months away, so Truman tries to take a bus to Chicago instead. The bus driver is forced to pretend that the bus is broken, so they can't leave the town. Later that day, Merrill comes home to Truman sitting in his car, telling her to join him. He predicts the appearance of people and cars on the sidewalk, saying that they've just been going around the neighborhood on a loop. Merrill brushes him off, causing him to become manic, but he speeds off down the street with his screaming wife. Suddenly, a traffic jam appears, then disappears again once Truman takes some turns at a rotary. He then proceeds towards an overwater bridge, but since he has a phobia of water, he closes his eyes and hits the gas, forcing Merrill to take over the steering wheel. They manage to cross the bridge towards the forest, crossing through a fake forest fire before being stopped by the police due to a supposed leak at the nuclear plant. Truman doesn't give up and trespasses the blockade until he's eventually caught by the men. Now home again, Merrill tries to talk Truman out of his paranoia and offers him a hot cocoa. She is doing a product placement, and Truman notices this weird way of talking. This prompts him to lash out at Merrill, asking her who she's talking to and saying that something is wrong with his whole life. Merrill is scared and aims a peeler at Truman, who ends up grabbing it from her and putting it near her throat. She screams for help to someone, causing Truman to let her go before Marlon barges through the door. Merrill runs to hug Marlon and cries out that this isn't professional, citing the dangerous work she has to do as an actress for the show. Then, Marlon consoles Truman as they have some beers, reminiscing about their childhood shenanigans together. He carefully says stuff to ensure Truman that there's no conspiracy and that he'd never lie to Truman. In reality, Marlon's words are guided by the show's director, Christof, behind the scenes. Marlon then reveals the real reason he came to see Truman that night, which is to show him that his father is actually still alive. The emotional reunion between father and son is broadcasted meticulously by Christof and his crew. In the real world, people are discussing Truman's father's return as the live broadcast of Truman drinking cocoa is ongoing on a smaller screen. They are interviewing Christof, who starts explaining the things they did to discourage Truman from leaving the island. His phobia is intentionally triggered, as well as many other manipulative tactics. While receiving calls from the audience, Lauren, who is no longer a cast member of the show, calls in to curse at Christof for trapping Truman in his fake life. Christof dismisses this, saying that he created a perfect world for Truman and that there's no stopping Truman if he ever decides to find out the truth. Back in Sea Haven, Truman seems to return to his normal self the following morning. In the evening, the sparse night crew is watching Truman sleeping in the basement when Christof comes into the broadcast room. He is suspicious of why Truman is sleeping there, but the crew member says that he's been sleeping there since Merrill left him earlier. Christof is still suspicious, so he orders the crew to call Truman's house phone. When he doesn't seem to stir in his sleep, he orders Marlon to come there and check on Truman. Marlon rushes to the house in the basement only to find that the sleeping figure is actually a blow-up toy and a recorded feed of Truman's snores. He looks around the basement and finds a hole to the house's lawn, confirming that Truman has escaped. Christof decides to stop the broadcast for the first time ever, to the surprise of many audiences. Every single crew that is staying in Sea Haven now searches for Truman together. It's too dark to find Truman, so Christof orders for the sun to be risen within the dome-like set. Despite it still being late at night, when they still can't find him, Christof has an idea to search at the sea, despite Truman's phobia. He was right, because Truman is actually on a sailboat quite far from the shore. Christof orders for the broadcast to continue, followed by cheers and bets made by the audience. They can't do anything to catch Truman since none of the actors know how to pilot a boat, so Christof plans to create a storm in hopes of scaring Truman back to shore. They start up the weather simulation, creating violent rain, winds, and waves that manage to knock Truman over. However, Truman refuses to back down, saying that he'd rather drown than continue living in this lie. Hearing this, Christof takes him on and increases the storm simulation, capsizing the boat and causing Truman to lose consciousness. Everyone watches silently in fear of his death, but finally, Truman rises up again. He comes out victorious and continues to sail until his boat hits the edge of the dome. Truman is finally faced with hard evidence of his fake life and starts banging on the dome's wall before eventually stepping down from his boat to walk along the edge. He finds a camouflaged staircase that leads to an exit door, but when he approaches the door, Christof speaks to him through the speakers like a voice of God. He gives Truman a choice to continue living in the safe and normal world he created for Truman, or step out and face the harsh real world in response. response, Truman only says his signature greeting before dramatically bowing, opening the door, and finally stepping into the real world. The world cheers for Truman, including Lauren, who runs out of her apartment. Meanwhile, Christof decides to cut the broadcast. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. Write your opinion about the movie in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new videos.